There is something that's called la faux folie. Supposedly, these are children that died through some horrific accident to where they're demon-like children, and they appear in the shape of lights that try to get you to follow them so you'll be lost forever in the swamps.
But yeah, when you hear like scraping claws underneath the bed and it moves and I was so terrified, dude. I pulled the blanket over my head. I could hear whatever it was breathing outside the sheet.
When I was a little gaffer there, we got into a car accident, hit a moose. My mom ended up under the steering wheel of the car, and she had a big hand-shaped bruise on her shoulder. It was like somebody pushed her underneath the steering wheel. My mom should have gotten decapitated. The weird part was we hit a moose, and we had a moose hanging from the rearview mirror.
The only other thing that I could think of would be a bear, but there's no bears in that area either. It's just not the right habitat for them, and when you shoot at a bear's going to move. It's going to take off for the most part. And this thing just shot and did nothing.
This material world that you're told is bound by science and everything else, obviously science and physics are very important. There is so much more out there that is left to study, that is left to learn about.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Investigation Cryptoparalogy. Sit back, get relaxed, and crack open your favorite cold beverage as we dive deep into the abyss of what we were told couldn't possibly exist. Find us on the web at www.investigation-cryptoparalogy. That's CRYPTOPARAOLOGY.com. On Facebook at www.facebook.com/investigation crypto. Listen to us on any major podcast players, including Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and of course Spotify. We continue to spread to more podcast players each day. You may contact us by using the contact page on the website, or by sending a direct message to our Facebook page, or by emailing us directly at investigationcryptoparalogy@gmail.com. That is investigation, CRYPTOPARAOLOGY@gmail.com. Also, I would like to add this. If you're feeling down on yourself, or like you don't matter, or there's no hope left, we're here for you. You can contact us through our Facebook page or by emailing us at investigationcryptoparalogy@gmail.com. We are happy to listen and possibly help you find a better tomorrow. If you don't want to talk to us, you can contact the Suicide Hotline of the United States. They have a crisis text line if you verbally speaking to someone is not your thing. Text HOME, all capital letters, HOME, to 741741. If you do want to verbally speak to someone, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. And if you are a veteran, you can also call 1-800-273-8255 and then press 1. Good evening. Welcome to the History Corner with host Troy Polkey. Grab a cold one, sit back, and let's talk about the history you weren't taught in school.
All right, so in this part of the podcast that's going to be available, believe it or not, there's some weird stuff that happened in history that you may not have learned in school, and there's a lot of stuff that your teachers don't have time to get into, and sometimes it's some really interesting stuff beyond just the boring thing of let's remember these dates, this time, so forth and so on, or what order different ages happened and things like that. A lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about are in archived documents that can be looked up. It is factual. This is not textbook information, so to speak. And we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of known time by human standards, so to speak. As far as different creatures that have lived in fossils that were found, you have the dinosaurs and things of that nature and different creatures that had roamed the earth during those time periods. But what I want to talk about is men and women. So many different theories and guessworks about, well, where did we come from? Scientists have found the bones and the skeleton of a woman that they have now labeled as Eve. The DNA markers on these bones that they found match over 95% of the DNA markers that they have in the world's DNA databases, which means she was related to everyone on the planet, past and present. That opens up a lot of questions as far as, is the Bible truthful? How were we put on the planet? And things of that nature. Not here to knock anybody's beliefs, first of all. Everyone is entitled to believe whatever it is they want to believe. If they want to believe God's a ping pong paddle and I shall worship the almighty ping pong paddle, hey, go for it. These are just, what I'm stating is what scientists have found. Now, based on that, the location that this woman was found is in Africa, where by all scientific knowledge, the Garden of Eden that is mentioned in the Bible or in the Torah for the ancient Hebrew scriptures and the Jewish people, it was in Africa where the Garden of Eden was located. So that brings up a whole nother series of questions that can be asked. A lot of times in history, they talk about the Cro-Magnon man and how the skull base was thicker and cavemen. That didn't exist as far as what real science has found. We teach it because that's what Darwin thought he had found. That's Darwin's theory of evolution. Again, it's guesswork. Nobody was actually there to see what happened. Okay. That aside, when man did come on the planet and communities started getting founded, there would always be a leader that had emerged. You could say that that was the real start of politics, so to speak, in kingdoms. At first, it started in family units where he would have to take care of his family and his mate would help in the hunting and the different things of that nature. All these different civilizations came about near river systems for a reason. Without water, life cannot exist. You need water, you need food, not necessarily shelter, but you do need some kind of protection from the elements. By all accounts of what has been found on different cave paintings, they did make shelters. These ancient people were not like what some people would think stupid. They weren't. And Will, you and I have talked about this. There's technology from the ancient past that has been lost, that no archaeologist has found yet, but that they found some evidences of, but can't prove what certain things were used for. They've even found different diodes that look like it would hook up to some type of battery. There's a type of screw that was found that's ancient, millions of years old, that looks like it was made with today's current equipment. That scientists can't figure out, where did this thing come from? And they use the radiocarbon dating on it. So these ancient people that we're talking about were by no means ignorant. They did have knowledge of how to build different shelters. and things of that nature. They were not ignorant. As this formed, what you have to understand, people are going to follow the food source. All land was once upon a time connected. If you don't believe me, break out a world map. Lay it out. Look at it and see how it's supposed to fit together like a puzzle. Our whole planet is sitting on plates. Giant plates that are floating on water or lava. Those plates are in movement because of various things. The movement can't really be detected by us because it's moving at a very super slow rate. When these plates collide, that's how mountains are formed over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So when the land was all connected, they have what archaeologists call Beringia, which was right around where the Bering Strait's at, a huge land bridge that connected Asia to North America. Thousands and thousands of years, these people migrate and they follow the food source across this bridge. Now, here's what scientists recently found out and is now finally making it into the educational arena, that wasn't the only way. These ancient people had knowledge of how to build boats and use boats to follow the coastline and get to these areas as well. So as the knowledge grows and as information comes to light, what people thought they knew about these very ancient people is now changing. And it changes the line of thought and it raises even more questions about these different things that come up. So this woman that was found in Africa, we're looking at possibly the mother of all humans that were on Earth. She's related to everybody. This is where life started. There's no more questions about that as far as scientific research is concerned. You can look this up. You don't have to like it. You can go, but look it up. Believe it, don't believe it. It's a choice. I'm telling you what the facts show. As they progressed and they followed all these codes, they started spreading out into various areas where these different river valley civilizations began developing. You had Mesopotamia, the Indus River Valley, which included Asia. And then you had China's river valleys that developed also in Asia and on down the line. And all these different civilizations were developing all around the same time frame. All of them developed their own different belief systems and ways of life. And yet all of them within their various religions have similar characteristics in what they wanted to believe. Every single civilization that has been recorded in history has some kind of record of a race of giants that existed. That is without question. All of them have the myths, the legends, the tales. Bones have been found. One of the guys, I don't know if I told you about this or not, Will, he was an actual king or some kind of royalty in very ancient Israel. His name was King Og. His shoulder span, based on the bones they found, was 6 feet. He was buried in a coffin that was 12 to 14 foot long with his spear that looked like a baby tree branch. That brings about a whole other question about humans and human development and how this came about. As these civilizations are developing, and in Mesopotamia, they started developing irrigation, how to farm the crops, moving away from, okay, now we can quit following the food and we can farm it. Scientists now believe farming was used before the first ice age as well. That because of the ice age coming and the weather conditions changing those many millions and millions and millions of years ago, that these guys had to stop farming because of the weather conditions destroying the crops, start hunting and gathering, following the food until the climate came back to a more natural state that was conducive for farming, to where they could start farming again. I have a hard time believing that somebody was just there and a seed fell out of his pocket and started to grow and he went, oh, look, I don't have to hunt anymore. That just doesn't make sense in my mind. So then they started using crop rotations as well, which tells me that they must have used that before as well. Because again, when humans were first appeared on the planet, they were not these ignorant things that people think that went around going, ooh, ooh, ah, ah. No, not at all. They had a complex civilization. They were not savages. And they had laws and they had ways of doing things. And that's what they brought with them as they spread throughout various areas. Once they separated, that's when things started getting really interesting. Because now you have the isolation effect. Mesopotamia had natural barriers. They had the river system at the top that flowed down that protected invasions from the north. They had deserts on either side. They had mountains. Same thing in this river valley. It had natural barriers. So it was very limited what they had to do as far as to defend their lands from any invaders that might want to come in. China was the same way. India was the same way. So it's natural that these different societies are going to develop different ways of doing things because they had no contact at that point with, or no major contact at that point with all the other civilizations around at the time. Give you an example. If I move to Arkansas and I stay in Arkansas for about 8 months, it's almost a guarantee that when I come back, man, I'm going to start talking like this. And whoo, I tell you what, man, I swear I went to Uncle Jed's house and that's what I'm talking about. Went over there and got in that pickup truck and we just went on down. It's natural. You pick up the way that somebody else speaks, without even realizing it. And some of your habits are going to change. Here in Louisiana, we say, hey, can I go with you to wherever you're going? Can I go with you? Other places, they say, hey, can I come with? And they never finish the sentence. Different customs. It was the same thing with the ancient people. They had different ways of doing things. Now, reading and writing, not everybody was skilled in that. It was just the scribes, and that was their main job. And that was to keep track of business transactions mostly. That was when those societies developed. Now, did they have writing and reading way before that? Archaeologists have not found evidence. It's my belief that they did. And that's why the scribes knew how to do it when the Great Migration took place because of the changing weather climate and following the food. Because you can't tell me it was just oral tradition, because you and I both know, as you tell one person a story and he tells another person and he tells another person, it changes. For it to be consistent, somebody had to write it down somewhere with a record. There has to be evidence. Now, with those ancient people, especially when we start getting into the time around when Israel started becoming a major power within the world around it, with the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks. This is where, when the Torah began being written, if you go into it and you read carefully at the way different things are described, and you and I had talked about this as well, Will. Let's just talk about when Elijah was taken up to heaven by the Lord. Elijah or Elisha, I forget which one. One is with a J, the other one was with an SH. One of them was carried away in the Lord's chariot. The way this is described, had eyes going all the way around it one way and eyes coming all the way around it the other way, and could go in any direction at the drop of a hat. That's the way this civilization described it, eyes. What is the shape of lights that are on planes? Circular. What if those were lights that the witness of this prophet being taken away saw? And this were the people coming to actually take him back to where mankind originally came from. A lot of people, oh no, you're talking about aliens. Well, we'll read the Apocrypha. Moses' eyes glowed white. He was hairless. He had a speech impediment to where people had a hard time understanding him. His face glowed so much he had to wear a veil. That does not sound like human to me. His skin was pale white and hairless. That's not albinoism. Albinos don't glow. So that's a whole other theory that archaeologists and scientists have researched, and you can even go look in the Apocrypha. You can look at Vatican records if they let you, and things like that. So with these ancient civilizations, they're developing these different things, and they're remaking all the tools that they once had. And it looked like as they kept getting closer to being back to where they almost were, some kind of natural disaster occurs and changes have to take place. Whether it's a great flood, a takeover, whatever the case might be. So now, after the Ice Age, weather conditions are okay. Then every single society on the planet reported an event called the Great Flood. This is not just in the Bible. This is every known civilization of that time has it in their records that this natural disaster occurred. And society had to restart all over again. So it was another remaking. Then the Dark Ages came. The religious faction of that time that did not want science to come out destroyed all records of any scientific activity going on at that time, and destroyed artworks and different inventions and things of that nature. So when you look at history, it's not just what you learn in a textbook. If you don't go and you don't research the archive documents, you're missing out. You're missing out on a huge piece to this puzzle that we call mankind. You're missing out on a huge piece of the puzzle of how our society developed. You're missing out on why so many people have different questions that boggle the mind, like why do trees live 900 years but we don't? Why was forever put into our minds when it supposedly can't happen? And that's something that scientists are still exploring. Now, we're going to get into near-death experiences and all that in another episode. That's not this one. So, when we come to it, and you think about different inventions, who was the first one that came up with schematics for a flying machine, Will? Will, you there?
The volume is all is the volume off?
Yeah, Will's volume's off. There he is.
Now,
Hey.
what did you say?
Okay, there he is. Who was the first guy that came up with the schematics for a flying machine? Hey, Danielle.
First guy to come up with the schematics for a flying machine. You know who that was, Danielle?
No.
Da Vinci.
There you go. Yep. I was about to give you the hint. He was one of the Ninja Turtles. Yeah. If you look at all the schematics that he did of flying machines and other inventions and the schematics that he did of the human body, it shows that that stuff had been done already way back. You can't tell me the man came up with it just out the blue in his mind. He had to get that information from somewhere, which means that that was existing technology already at that time. So that's when you get into history, and it can be a very fickle thing as far as what people are taught in school and what the archive documents say. Because in school, they just brush over it. Okay, causes and results of this war, causes and results of that war. The why these things happen is never, ever explored. And that's the missing piece of the puzzle, which is why we have all the mess we have today with politics. And by the way, folks, Will likes to dig in his nose and eat boogers, and his wife fries them up for him sometimes. And by the way, his sound is off. That's why he wasn't responding.
Gonna have to cut that out. No, I can't. I keep my sound muted. That way, it's just just you, because that way I'm not interrupting you or anything that's being said in the background.
I know, but I'm also watching Danielle show you stuff on the phone, and but that's human nature. So, but anyhow, so yeah, Da Vinci came up with a lot of those inventions way back. Again, this is way back in history. We're talking about still in the BCs at that point, or a little bit into the ADs. So all of these different inventions, when you look at farming with crop rotations, plowing, irrigation, I mean, the Egyptians, what they came up for irrigation, I don't think anybody in today's modern society would have even been able to come up with that. Then they actually developed a system where they would dig holes before the Nile would flood over. And as the water would collect in those holes, they used large levers with buckets to dip the buckets into the hole, to then bring the buckets around into another trough that then fed it into where the crops were. So these guys were highly, highly intelligent. When you look at some of the structures that were built, like the pyramids and archways that had to have that keystone that held everything together, and the physics that's involved in that, and the mathematics that's involved in the way that they did the stone cutting, and the measurements that had to be so precise and so exact. To say that they didn't have technology would be a mistake. Now, people think that our generation right now is the one that invented this computerized technology. According to what I've seen in different archive documents on what we believe used to be Atlantis, that's not true. They found things that look like should fit into a computer, that the radiocarbon dating on it is over 5,000 BC. They found other tools that they have no clue what these tools were used for, made from metal. In one documentary, which is called China's First Emperor, they found out that China actually invented steel before any other civilization because they had a crude form of steel that was used in their weapons. China invented a modified crossbow that could shoot further at that time, which is why China was one of the major military powers of that time. And they came about with all of this with the discovery of the terracotta warriors from Huangdi. When he built those thousands of warriors with individual faces and the weapons, and they even found some of the weapons buried with the soldiers and looked at it. So when we put all of that together, it leads us to the basis that history is not what you think it was. Now, when you get into mythology and belief systems and gods and goddesses, and you look at the complexity of the beliefs that guided these people in their day-to-day lives, then you find out exactly how intelligent they were to be able to come up with these different things and these different laws to govern their societies. You know, the Mesopotamians, their stories about Gilgamesh being a hero and looking for eternal life in his hunt and seeing his best friend die and then battling like he did. And you look at their other gods and goddesses and the different rules that they put upon that society. So these people lived a complex way. They believed that you had to follow a certain set of rules to guide a life that was worth living in order to keep a lawful society. With India, with the Bhagavad Gita and the Vatas and their religious beliefs with all their different gods and goddesses following the ways of Brahman. With India's caste system, if you were born into a lowly station, you stayed there your whole life. Your only hope was to live the best life you could in that station and then come back to a higher station until you could become one with Brahman again. All about living a better life. Buddhism in China, which was a similar belief to Hinduism, following the Tao, your duties that you had to implement. And different emperors employed different methods. Like, for example, with Confucius, Confucianism was following the ways of the Tao first, family first, everything else next. Do your duty. And Confucius is the one that came up with civil service examinations to make sure people were qualified for their jobs instead of just hiring family. Then you had a different way which went completely to the opposite end, which was called legalism. There's right, there's wrong. You break the law, we do this to you, and it was harsh. The nobles and the emperor liked this because it was to keep the poor people under control. Then Taoism focused on nature. Forget your worldly desires, be one with nature, and that way you could become one with the universe. 3 different belief systems that was employed at different times within China's history for various reasons. Legalism was primarily a selfish reason based on the greed of humans. It was to keep the rich and powerful in control, which failed because when you push people hard enough, they're going to rebel against it. But the rivers, the stories written about all the different rivers, the rivers were life. And civilization's birth was near river systems. There's a reason why the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia was called the cradle of life. It's because that's where civilizations actually started out. That's where, not mankind, but civilizations near these waterways. Because if you believe the stories about Eden, mankind was kicked out of Eden. Where the bones were found, people spread from there and migrated from Africa to different parts of the earth. So now, in the next podcast for History Corner, we're going to talk about the history of dragons. And believe it or not, folks, fire-breathing, flying dragons may have been real. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for tonight. I sincerely hope you will join us again next time for another spine-tingling, hair-raising experience from the depths of the abyss. If you would like to contact me about an experience you have had or to get on the show, email me at investigationcryptoparology@gmail.com. That's investigation, CRYPTOPARAOLOGY @gmail.com.
'Cause my monster's